So we are very much recording now, and I share my screen also. Okay, so I'm expecting that you can see my screen. Okay, good. So can you see my screen with Visual Studio Code and the code of our last lecture, like Monday's lecture? Okay, so thank you very much. Right, so we'll start from here, and let's have a quick review of that, because we are still talking about this object-oriented programming in JavaScript, and we have to cover some advanced, some advanced part of JavaScript over here today. So we talked about some of the traditional JavaScript, and today I'll talk about some of the, as I said, some of the interesting facts. Right. So we saw that people are still coming in. So we saw that, if you remember, that this was something from the old one. We had an object, and we can create objects, and those objects have, like, a combination of a key value pairing, and those key value pairing necessarily refers to some of the values that can be collected in an object. And we say that whenever we say that object, Tanish, how are you? Whenever we say that object is typically, it's a unique entity that has, that contains some properties and methods. So, right now, if you see this object has some properties. It has first name, last name, email, logged in. Okay, someone is not muted. I think, Tanish, you are not muted. I have done that. Right. So you see that I have this this one. So again, if you have seen that previous lecture, you would have seen that we have got this, where there are 4 properties. So we can have properties, and also you know that we can just define methods in them as well. So I'm just taking a quick review of all those things. And the same ways, if you remember that we can create the arrays of the values, and this is very important, as I said, that this will be important for your future assignments as well, that we can create the array of the values. Now here, during the review, I want to give you another. I'll just give you some interesting fact related to this data, because I talk about something called a JSON data today, which is very important and which we usually use, and we can just use that in a general web environments. We use this JSON data to format. But anyhow, if you see here that we have got an array which I'm calling as users, and I'm collecting multiple users by using these curly braces. So you remember that we have got this, for example, the first record of Alan, and then we have the second record of Bob, so separated by a comma, and it means that I am making the array of objects. It is an array that contains multiple objects. This is object 1, this is object 2, this is object 3, this is object 4. So I can collect multiple objects in one array. And what that would give me is that I can now implement multiple methods on these, on these values, on these given data. And those methods will do what? Those methods will give me this power of using or accessing data. So if I say user 3 of email in this way, so I'm talking about, so if this is an array, so this represents the 0th location, this represents the 1 location, and this represents the 2 location, and this represents the 3 location. So when I say user 3 of email, I'm right now talking about that at email. If you have seen that, you remember that we can run that one, and it will show me. Okay, I don't know if I'm writing lots of things over here, so that's why it is just showing that. But anyhow, if you see over here, I'm just accessing the email of a particular user, and I can just change the value from here, And this is very important. And by mind you, I would like just to remind you that this is very important, that you need to have, you need to know that how to manipulate data when it's available to you. As I said, you will be getting data in JSON format, but right now, if you see that this is in a simple JavaScript object format, and we are just doing that. So this is one of the way of playing with data, or using the data and extracting all the useful information out of it. And that is the same again. That I can use a for each loop or something like, I've discussed this for each loop, I've discussed for off loop, I've discussed for loop, but all of these loops can be used to extract out information from a given set. So this was another thing that we could do. Same is for the for each user, and we can just now. So object types, as we talked about, and today also I'll talk about this one, that in objects we have some getter functions and setter functions, and that is something that you might have studied in your object-oriented programming as well. There is some function, they are called setters and they are called getters functions. So all those functions that can change the state of an object, they are called setter functions. And all those functions that can read the state of an object, they are called the getters functions. So we define, actually alongside data, we can also define getter and setter functions. But here, in a very simple example, what we have done, if we just define an object obj4 name WEB222, and I just do console.log obj4, so I'm talking about I'm reading this. When you are reading this object, or of course, when you are reading something, and you are reading obj4.name, you're talking about a getter function. Right. In the same way, if you see here that if you are setting up a value, obj4.name is equal to 322, you are setting up the function. And here is one very important thing that I told, that JavaScript is so friendly that JavaScript would allow us, even though that our object only contains one field, only contains one value or key value pairing. But even if you just define a field by yourself and store something, and you just print that array, you will see that everything just pops up over there. Like this will be added to that one. And I talked about that one. But anyhow, so the thing was, and then I told you that how to delete that one. So this is just a review that I'm taking. But here comes a bit of more, you can say, a practical type of an object over there, where I'm defining an object with a user. Again, it's a single user object that I'm defining. Let's say first name and then last name and then logged in, and then I've added few more fields. So one of the fields that I've added is the age, which is of course one of the field that I'm adding. And then I have added one array over there. So hobbies, and I'm saying that the hobbies are these 3 hobbies, for example. So this is an array being introduced inside an object, and that's an interesting thing. As I said, the data that you always receive online, wherever you'll be working with some data, and as I said, with the JSON data, for example, so to speak, you will get some complex type of data. So this data might contain some of the arrays inside that one and things like that. So you need to just keep an eye on that. And then we have, for example, defined another field, which is pref, and this is an object within an object. You see that this pref or something preferences, this is an object, and this object has 2 properties, and one property is color and the other property is model. We have just defined those 2 properties over there. To let know that we have these preferences. Like again, we have an object inside an object. That's an interesting thing. Then we have just given a score null. And here comes the interesting part, that we have defined the functions over here. You can always define the functions, and those functions. And by the way, you can call these functions, and in real object-oriented world, you might know that they are not called the functions, rather they are called, if you know about that, sorry, it is making this one. So they are called methods. Methods. So we can define methods also inside the object. So first method is login, for example, and this method is, again, this is a function, an anonymous function that we have defined, and this anonymous function is just doing what? Logged in. It is changing the value of logged in. Same goes with the logout. So both of these are the methods that we use. right? So this is one more. This was one more a bit of practical example of object. How you would in your real life really come across the objects. That's something that we have talked about. And then of course, if you want to call, you say user.login, user.logout, console.log user. You can just do that. Now then we talked about something called constructor function, and that's where if you see that way, that this is the point from where we say that the real object-oriented concept starts. So constructor functions. JavaScript has this nature, or has this kind of object-oriented programming, which necessarily starts with a constructor function or something. And what is the rule behind that, or why? What is the need behind that? So if we say that this is a user and I want to create multiple users, I want to create thousands of users, I'll have to write each and every user's definition once again and again and again, and that would create so much code. Rather than doing that, why not? If I create a constructor function, you would have studied constructors in your object-oriented programming course. There you have studied about constructors, that it's a special kind of function or a method in a class that has same name as the class name, and it is automatically called at the time of instantiation of that object. Am I right? Have you studied this definition of constructor in object-oriented programming? That a method that is automatically called at the time of creation of object, and also it has the same name as your class has. Is that the right definition? Again, a definition that you have like read or discussed. Yeah, exactly, Clef in C++. So yes, that's a definition. Now, constructor function here is a bit different in JavaScript. Just consider it in a way that it's a bit different over here. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that here we just define a function, and I have discussed that in detail in my lecture, but just giving for those who have, so just giving a review for everyone. So constructor functions in JavaScript, they start with a capital letter. They are like functions, not like functions. Rather, you can say that they are functions typically. So they are functions, and but they have a special behavior, you can call it, or you can call it that this. Sometimes you just try to differentiate them from the others. So what you do is that you always start a constructor function with a capital letter. Most of the literature, you would find that they would start a constructor function with a capital letter, right? And you see that it says that this constructor function can be converted to a class declaration, which I'll be doing today. But again, I'm just telling you that a constructor function. Now, if you define a constructor function like this, and I've just defined the same thing in a constructor function, what happens is that now this becomes a very interesting, very easy way for me to create objects of this class, this constructor function. So primarily, or in a classical sense, JavaScript has something called a constructor function, and that constructor function can be used to create objects. Again, typically, this is the way to create objects, and you would have seen that in maybe C++. I think it has a slight different way of creating objects. But if you see here that I'm creating an object of this constructor, and I say that user1 is equal to new user, Alex John, so I'm just passing these two values over there, and I know that these two values will be settled over there. Logged in will be set to false by itself, and we are not providing any values for that one. Age will be set to 20. So all users who will be created, they will have same age, same preferences, same logged in, same score, and same function. Does that make sense to everyone? Because of course we are just providing you two parameters, the first name and the last name, and we are just setting them up. But other than first name and last name, everything else would be set up by default. Making sense to everyone? So this function and everything will be exactly the same. So when I create an object of this one, user1 is equal to new user, Alex John. So it's basically Alex and John will become the first name and last name. Other than that, everything will be same for Alex John, for Bob Smith, for Christina Harris, whatever. So all of them will have the same properties other than these two properties. right? So this is basically one of the method of creating an object in that one. And that really gives us the power of some few things. So again, and then we talked about, of course, that we have just printed them out and we have just set up some values and we can do that. Now, the one of the very interesting aspect of that was, I'll just make it a comment for a second, and I'll show you here, prototype or prototypal inheritance. So this in JavaScript is something very, very interesting and something very useful. That something is called prototype of a constructor, first of all. In other words, it's basically a prototype of a class or an object, by the way. But here we are saying that it's a prototype for a constructor or an object. What is a prototype? Prototype is something very interesting. It's sort of, you can say, a parent container or something that can hold lots of properties or lots of methods inside itself. And those properties and methods would not be copied to every copy of the object created through that constructor. Does that make sense to everyone? Again, I talked about that in the previous lecture, but I'm just giving you a quick summary because I'll be working on that one today. So it's basically that its prototype is something which will keep few things out of the object, main object body, main constructor body, but that would be available to us, and that is called a prototype. And if we are doing that, it's the typical term for this one is prototypal inheritance. We talk about that it's a prototypal inheritance. So if you see here, rather than putting those extra functions in constructor, put them in prototype. A prototype is like a template to create an object. Prototype is just like a template to create an object. So see here, rather than defining these two functions inside that one as part of the body, why not take those two functions out of it and define them in a way? First of all, the name of the prototype, name of the constructor function. So my voice is not clear. It says my voice is not clear. Is it for everyone? My voice is not clear. For me, is it any better now? Hello. Oh, it's not clear. Still, it's not clear. Okay, just give me a second. And audio drops sometimes. Okay, so probably how about it now? Because it looks like now it should be a bit better. Okay, Danish, it's clear for you. Danish, is it clear now? Okay, it's okay. Okay, that's wonderful. Can I get a feedback from some other students as well? Is it okay for everyone? I've got a response from Tanish, Pravneet, Sabine, and Juan. Okay, at the moment it's clear first. Okay, right. Oh, that's wonderful. Now, yes, listen. So that's we talk about that. We take the user like the constructor name dot prototype and dot login is equal to, and you remember that we have used this arrow function syntax, and you would be using this arrow functions. I would be using this arrow functions a lot of time. So this logged in is equal to true, or again the same way we have to say this dot is logged in is equal to false. So that way what happens is that when we create an object, so I have just defined an age over there as well. So when I create an object, these two functions are not automatically become part of that object. Right. So in that scenario where you understand that there are lots of methods in a class or in a constructor function, and you want like them not to be included in every object that is created, because you know why I am saying that, because if you use it, if you want, you can use it, and that is available in the prototype. But if you don't use it, that would not become the part of your object. So do you understand that we are trying to save a lots of space in this situation where there are thousands of objects being created, thousands of the objects being worked on, and then we are not including a function with everything. And if you remember, if you have seen that the lecture, the last lecture, if I show you something, I showed that in inspector to everyone in console. In console, I told everyone that now if you are creating an array, ARR equal to new array 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So if you see here that I have created an array and that is ARR. Now, interestingly, when I write ARR dot, I get a lots of properties and methods over there. Index of, join, last index of, reduces, unshift, values, toString. These are so many methods over there. Now, where these methods are coming from, I'll let you know where these methods are coming from. So if I come over here and I hit ARR, you see that it gives me these array values. And if I open that up, you see that the values are appearing 0, 1, at 0th location, this is 1, at 1 location, it's 2, at 2 location, it's 4. Now, if I come over here and if I show you, there is something called a prototype. Now, remember, when I'm creating that, it is not becoming the part of it, but it is available if I want to use any one of them. Ashana, is that making sense? So again, these all methods are available at my disposal, but if I do not use them, they will not become part of my array that I have created. Does that make sense to everyone? I'll need a quick feedback from everyone. So this prototype is something very interesting. And here also, if you see that I'm accessing this array with capital A, so it's also showing that that I have this as a sort of constructor function that I'm creating array of. And now it is basically showing me. Okay, thank you, Claire, for giving the feedback. So this prototype is there. All those functions are available to me, but this function. So remember, there are two things. One is that function is available to you. They are all available, but they are not part of my object array that I have created. Same goes with the strings. If I create a string, name equal to, and I say new string, and I'm creating a string name, Alan, for example. Now, if I say a name is coming as Alan, and if I again ask you that if you ask about what is the string, it'll just tell you that the string has typically this function, and there is a native code that comes on. So there are lots of functions that are available if the string. So if I say name dot, so you see that length, anchor, and whatever, I can just always calculate that one, match all, normalize, replace. So these are on the method that you'll be using, trim and to uppercase and something like that. So I can just since it's a function, so I'll need to have just this one, and you see that it just converts on that. So yes, that was that. So prototype is something very important and interesting, and we have just talked about that one. And I hope you have learned a lot, and we have discussed that over there in our last class, like on Monday section. And now today I've just reviewed all these things because I wanted to give you a good sense of some of the things that we do. Now there are other methods of creating objects as well. And I'll talk about one of the other method, which is in there in notes as well. And I've asked everyone to just use those notes. So what is that method? It is that object.create. Object.create. This is another method of creating objects within JavaScript. Now let's talk about this one. And I'm just creating an object from, for example, over here. So I say var new obj equal to curly braces, right? So I'm creating a new object. And for example, I can collect certain values. So for example, I can say is new, something like that. True. It's a Boolean value. Inverted commas, and then print introduction, for example, just a right. So print introduction. I'm just defining a function, So if you're defining a function, you will just define it like this. And we have already talked about this. You can use the array-like syntax as well, or you can use this one. So here I'm saying, for example, console.log. And I can use backticks. You remember backticks? My name, for example, I'm just talking about is $, curly braces, this For example, this dot, or I just wanted to use the same one, but anyhow, we can just use that one. I can give a name over here, for example, name, and I can say wow, right, and just a comma. Okay, so now I'm saying that this part name, that will be the first value, right? And am I studying something like that? Just to make it right. So I will just use here the variable. So variable will be coming as this part is, or am I new? Just click that. Am I new? So let me just do that. Dollar is start is new. Right. So this will just replace that one. Okay. So backticks. You remember that backticks are so very important, and we can just work with these backticks a lot, and these backticks will give you so much power and so much things to do. Anyhow, so I've just created another object, just new object. I have just called that one. Now I'm using object.create method. So if I come over here and I say, for example, new obj2, rather let's define it, var new obj2. I'm just creating another object, right? So what I'll do is that object.create. And here I'll say new obj. Right? Now we have just created new obj. Now let's talk about something. So this is basically if I want to just print that one, let's print that one because we have print introduction method. Let's do one thing. Of course, if I say new obj2 dot print introduction, this is the method. Let's run that and see what will be the output we'll get. So you see that it says that my name is Bob, am I new? It's true. Basically, whatever is the value, it is just showing that value. And I can show you something interesting over here. So if I say that it is false, for example, so of course now the result will be false. Am I new is basically false. Now listen here. An interesting fact is that if I take out name from here, for example, as their name was not there, if I take out name from here, let's see. Of course, first of all, you know that what will happen. It will say my name is undefined because name has not been defined, right? So object.create has created another object on the copy of this one. Now, what I can do, I can do something like this. I can say new obj2 dot name, which is not the field over there. But I told you in today's lecture as well that this JavaScript is so user friendly that it will allow us to just add fields to that one. So for example, if I say Alan, I just add that one, right? So I can even do that. So if I just run that, you see there, my name is Alan. So now this Alan has been set as the name, and now this name is accessed. Even though the name was not present over there, but I have inserted that name into obj2. Now, how about if I print new obj by itself? New obj dot print introduction. Right? Can anyone tell me? Let's run that one and see what happens. You see, it says that my name, that is undefined. Do you see that? And why it is saying this undefined? Because the name was not set before this, like in new obj, the name was not defined. Is that right? But here, what we are trying to see, that obj.create has done what? Object.create will do what? Whatever object is provided over here, it will just create a copy of that one and create a new object for that. Right? So it will just, do what? it will make a copy of that one, and that copy will be available to your to your new object. So a new object will be created by using this one. Right, this is another method, and you can find that in notes as well. When you just study your notes, you'll find this method over there as well. And by the way, as I said, I think to someone in the last class, that we'll be doing a complete project on that one once we are done with HTML and DOM as well. I will be doing a complete project where I'll use this all object-oriented concepts with you, and you will enjoy that. Now, there is another thing that I want to use, and that is classes or class. Class is something you are familiar with. So JavaScript has class, like class class keyword also. But remember, this was introduced in ES5, and of course, ultimately ES6. Then it got popular in ES5 and ES6. Can any one of you tell me what is ES5 and ES6? Because I told this in the very beginning, in our very first class when we were having introduction of JavaScript. Can anyone tell me what was ES6 and ES5? Clef, thank you very much. I wanted to know from the others as well. Clef, no, I don't need any answer from you now. I need someone else to jump in and tell me what is ECMAScript or what is ES5 or ES6. Not Clef, by the way. I'm waiting for someone to jump in other than Clef and let me know what was ES5 and ES6. Because this will show me that how many of you have been just, of course, taking classes at edition version of ECMAScript. Okay. And you may be right. Let's see if someone else comes up. Okay, I'll leave this question. Yes, this is the standardized version of JavaScript. Yes, you're right. Standardization of JavaScript. And yes. So now you listen about that. So ES5, ES6 introduces this word of class keyword, but still, please remember, because this is an interview question also, you will, when you appear for the interview of JavaScript as well. So they'll ask you that maybe that are the classes also available, or can we use the classes in exactly the same way as we use in some other object-oriented programming languages? The answer, is no typically. Even class keyword is used here, but classes are also, let me see these comments. I want you to just remember this. Classes are also, I'll write that in capital. Classes are also, or they are called blueprint of the objects. And that is not something new of an object. But remember, there are no real classes in JavaScript. I'll tell you what does that mean. Real classes. There are no real classes in JavaScript. Classes are blueprint of an object. Now, what are classes? Classes are in JavaScript. They are considered as the syntactic sugar. I'll use this syntactical sugar over the JavaScript's existing prototypal inheritance or prototype based inheritance. Now listen. So in its original way, listen, the classes as you are using in C++, classes are not in their real essence available in JavaScript, even though we'll be using class shortly. We'll create a class by ourselves. But remember, they are the syntactic sugar. You know what does that mean, syntactical sugar? By syntactical sugar, we mean that it's basically the old prototypal based, the same thing that we were talking about. We have talked about this constructor, and we have talked about this prototypal inheritance. So they say it's basically the same thing, but it's the syntactical sugar over that, and they have started to call it classes. Now, I'm summarizing this one, and it's an interview sort of question for everyone. Please remember that if you are, of course, in this class or you are looking at the video shortly or later on, just try to understand the concept. The classes are not in their original essence in JavaScript. Rather, they are the syntactical sugar over the existing or the classical object, like object-oriented or prototype-based inheritance available in JavaScript. So classes they are not in the real, real theme or real essence as they are in object-oriented programming languages. But yes, there is like this notion of class that we use. But of course, you need to remember that these classes are not, not this exactly the same as you are using in object in C++ programming language or some other programming languages that we use. Does that make sense to everyone? Right? Okay, that's wonderful. And that's something that you need to keep in mind, because that would give you a very nice thing. And okay, so now let's see how would we define class. And of course, you know that you have defined classes a lot of time, but here it would be a bit different. So for example, so we have a class keyword. We can use this class keyword, and usually again we will do what? We try to name our class in a capital letter, right? So a very old definition, you would have seen this example 1,000 times, umpteen times. Vehicle. I'm just creating a class vehicle. Almost in every object-oriented programming, the first class we study is the vehicle class. Anyhow, so I'm just defining this vehicle class, something like that. And you remember the constructor used to be there, and we used to say that constructor is the same name as the function. Now, this is a bit different over here. What is the difference? In JavaScript, we do not define constructor with the same name as the class name. Rather, we define constructor with the keyword constructor. Makes sense to everyone? Even though this is a method, this is another method, but this is a constructor method. So for example, I'll say name, maker, and engine. For example, it will take 3 parameters. I'm creating a constructor. So I say this dot name equal to name, exactly the same way as we usually do. Maker equal to maker, and this dot engine equal to engine. Are you getting that? This is the constructor. So defining constructor in JavaScript is a bit different from defining constructor in other languages, because in other languages, you remember, you used to do what? You could define a function like this, vehicle, and that would be the constructor over there. You remember that? But of course, this is not the case here. So constructors are defined by using this constructor keyword, right? And for example, so I have just defined this constructor, and I can define, for example, another function. Now, I don't need to use that, that object-like notation over here, because now I'm defining a class. And while you are defining a class, no need to define that public or private, the access specification. By default, JavaScript defines them as public. So for example, if I say return, it will return a backtick. The name of the car is, for example, and dollar this dot name. I'm just passing that name over there. Right. So this is fun. So this is very easy way of defining a class, and we have just defined a class. And now, if you want to just make object of this class, very easy, as we know how to create that one. So I can say, you remember, we can see let as well. So let car1 equal to new vehicle, and I can just give it a name, for example, anything, Honda or whatever. And it would be maker, right? So I can say something like that. I don't know. So I can say Honda here, and I can say, for example, 2500 cc, right? Something like that. So let's put that also in single quotes, or it will automatically come in double quotes, by the way. Oh, I did a mistake. So it mind that, right? So now I have created a car. So of course, now this is the same way as we were defining by using this object or the function way. But now we are not using function anymore. We are using a class, and this is very important. As I said, we'll be creating an object, creating a project later on, and that project I will let you know that you can just use. We'll be just defining that project by using the function function or the traditional way of JavaScript, and as well as we'll be working with the modern way or ES6 way of doing that. But remember, again, I'm saying that even though it looks like a bit more that like a normal class, but remember, as I said, this is just a syntactical sugar over the constructor method. You know what I mean? It's typically almost doing the same thing, but just the class keyword comes over here and this becomes a class, and constructor comes with the name of constructor. Is that making sense to everyone? So that is basically what it will be. It will be just, giving that it's a class over there. Right. So this is the class, and again, so class is over here, and we can use this class keyword to define classes. And some developers, they say that this is easy to use this class syntax. Why? Because mostly people are familiar with this class and object notion or notations from other programming languages, so they usually prefer this class syntax. But remember, this class syntax was introduced in ES5 and ES6, the standardization of our JavaScript. And still we are saying that even though the class keyword has been discussed, but still it says that this is not real class. In the real sense, it is not the class, and they are basically called as, they can be just, you can say that these are typically that syntactic sugar over that one. Right. So this is basically what this is. Typically we have got this one. Now the other concept of object oriented programming that I'll be talking about today, or I'll be just giving. So again, we are right now discussing the object oriented aspects of the JavaScript, by the way. So we have talked about the classes, and you can just use these classes like that one. And by the way, one of the very important aspects, static. Do people know about the static? Anyone has idea what are static areas or static methods or static variables in a class? Does anyone know about that? Yes, can anyone let me know what are static? Clef, do you know about static keyword or static areas of a class, static areas of an object, or something like that? Have you people heard this static word before with respect to object oriented or classes like? Yes, anyone? Okay, there must be an answer to this. The answer can be no, or answer can be yes. The silence is not the answer. Clef has no idea. Anyone else? Okay, Clef, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, Constructor says no idea, no problem. Okay, who is that? Who is not unmuted or muted? Parmeet, you are not unmuted. Do you want to say something, Parmeet? Parmeet. Okay. Anyone else? The Clef says no idea, and Constantine says there's no idea. So I would like others to also jump in and let me know that if you have. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about. I'll talk about this static over here. And as I said, when we'll be creating a project, I will be just giving you that is specific. So static is a very interesting area. Static is a very interesting keyword. If I ask you now, I'll just for a second, I'll just reopen this class vehicle. Now see here. If I ask you, can I call this get detail function without creating the objects? In other words, if I say car1 dot get details, everyone makes sense that now it will be called and it will just print whatever is basically coming over there, or it is just returning, right? So it's just returning. So I can I can print that one. Console.log car1.details. So see here. You see, the name of the car is V8. So for example, the name of the car, we have just taken out the name of the car. Now I have a question. Who would like to answer that? Can I call this get details function without creating the object of this class? Because this much you have studied in your object-oriented programming language, like course C++. Can I call this get details function without creating this object? Yes or no? No. Cliff says no. Anyone else? Anyone else? Can I call this function without doing anything? Clef has done no. So Pavneet, do you have any idea that can I call this get details function without calling this without creating the object of this class? Without creating the object of this class. Now, interestingly, listen about that one. If I come over here and I do a very interesting thing, static get details to. I'm creating another function and I've called this static. And I hope you will understand the concept over here. And I say return. And right now I'm just returning a simple hello because I don't want to just right now. And now I have a static function get details to. Right? Get details to. Now I will just make it comment everything. And now I'll come over here and I say console.log. Now, what is the name of the class? The class name is vehicle. I can say over here, I can say over here vehicle dot get details to and see what happens. Now, if I try to do this same with vehicle get details one. So vehicle dot get details one means the get details function. If I want to call this function also over here, and let's run that one. You see that I am getting an error. Now, how many of you understand what is the static role over there? Now you see that it says that this console.vehicle.get details is not a function. It says get details is not a function, but get details to is being accessed with the name of the class. Now listen, this is very interesting. If a method or something has been defined as static in a class, that method or that variable or that something is accessible without creating object. Now, why this get details is not working? Because there is no object being created. You see that object is dead over here. So this get details is a normal function and it can never be accessed over here. We cannot access a non-static member without creating object. Most of you will be thinking, what is that benefit of that one? And I'll tell you, as I said, I'll be making a project and I'll tell you at that time that you remember that we created a static class. So see here, there is a static method of this class, get details to, which can be accessed with the name of the class. If I just write the name of the class, the method will be available. But if I have a normal function, I cannot call this function without creating the object. Does that make sense to everyone? This is very important. And I want you to just remember that this will be a very, very important thing for you, because we will be just doing all these kind of things over there. Yeah, Clef says clear. Anyone else? That's good. Pavneet said that this is clear. Right. So Constantine says that yes, it's clear to Constantine as well. That's good. So that's wonderful. So just remember that you have to remember about this static, and I'll just let you know. And I'll write few notes about that one. So static, let me write that in the cap. A static method slash I can say static component of a class can be accessed without creating the object of that class, right? So we can, it is similar to private and public. No, public, not at all. It is not similar to public and private. Public and private are very, very, very different things. So public and private things are, if you have defined something public, it would be accessible outside of the class to the world, outside world. But if you have defined something private, it won't be accessible to the outside world. Here we are not saying that outside world accessible. Here we are saying, let's talk about the public and private. If something is public or private, if it is public even, you cannot access that thing which is public without creating object of that class. So the concept over here is that without creation of an object, if you can access something, that is called static. Pavneet, are you getting that? I have just tried to detail it a bit more. It's not about public or private methods or public or private members. It's all about accessing something without creating of an object. And remember, in Java, and I'm talking about now classical object-oriented languages, they say that a class itself is of no use unless you create its object. Makes sense to everyone? And of course, that is a very right sentence to be given, a very right sentence to be given. We cannot use anything of the class if we do not have created the object. But there is something called a static area of a class that you can access without creation of that one. Yes, Papi, thank you very much. You have just given the feedback that now you understand that one. Right. So this is one another aspect that you have to remember: static aspect, static member. And we'll be talking about this static a lot. And as I said, we'll be creating an object. We'll be creating a project where I will use this static method. I'll define a class where I'll define static methods, and you'll see, and you'll realize that at that, maybe some of you might be thinking at right now that what is the benefit of defining these static classes. So remember, yes, there are benefits of defining this static classes, and I'll just let you know those benefits when we do that. Right. So now I'll just take a quick break of 5 minutes and 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll be back. And then I'll discuss some more interesting object-oriented aspects of our JavaScript. So let's have a quick break and refresher. You also take a cup of tea or something, and we'll be back after 5 to 7 minutes. It's 2:27. I'll be back at 2:32. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy your break. So now we are recording. Okay, so we have been talking about different aspects of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. So one of the aspects that we would like, as we have talked about, this is static also, and you see that static is just something very, very important, and we have seen. And I will talk about this static without creating object. We will talk about some of them. Now I would like to talk about encapsulation, and if you know about that, this is another very important pillar of object-oriented programming, that tells us that it wraps around the data and the functions, the methods, and the data together. So we'll talk about that, how we can implement encapsulation. As I said, that most of the object-oriented concepts that we study in other programming languages, which are real object-oriented programming languages, they are. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen, by the way, right? So I'll share my screen. So we'll talk about this encapsulation here. Can you see my screen, everyone? Can you just screen with my Visual Studio Code? Can everyone see that? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right. So encapsulation, which is another very important property of object-oriented programming languages, But as I said, that most of the things have been like, they are not in their original essence present in JavaScript. JavaScript has its own way of defining those things. As we said that the class is basically nothing but its traditional prototypal inheritance has been sugar coated or syntactically sugar, like, it has been coated over that one. But anyhow, so what is encapsulation? You know the definition: the process of wrapping property and function within a single unit. Encapsulation, usually, we call this encapsulation as, that word has come from capsule, that encapsulates something. So the binding of code and data together. And when we say code means we are talking about the functions, and when we say data means we are talking about the variables or something like that. So it's basically a wrapping around or wrapping of all those things together. That's called, encapsulation in general. Right. So let's take one example here in JavaScript, how we achieve this encapsulation. So we have a class, for example, we can call it person. Person is another most widely used class name. So name and ID, if we are just taking these two values, first person, this dot name equal to ID, name, and this dot ID equal to ID. Right, so this is our constructor that we have. Now we have a method here. So for example, we say add address method, and it has a variable that is coming over there, as a parameter. So we'll say this dot, so I'll call it basically this dot address equal to AD, or maybe you can call both of them address, just if you prefer, even though this will work with us. Okay, so this dot address is equal to address, and now so get details of the user, as we have talked about before. So if I want to get the user details, I'll just console.log with a backtick. I'll say name is $this.name. You remember, this is so important and so easy it becomes when you are using backticks, that you can just, very simply and very easily, you can just, print all those things. So this dot address, right? So these two things that we want to just print this address and these two things, and now we have got this one, right? So we have just created this person class, and now let's create its object. So for example, let's call the subject Alan, for example, new person, and name is Alan, and what else? We want an ID, for example. So ID is 01, right? I want to create this Alan. Now, Alan dot add address. I want to call this add address function. I want to set up some address for Alan. So for example, I say Toronto, and I have set up that one. Now, if you see Alan dot get details, now let's run that. And nothing extravagant in here, but we have to discuss some concept what we are doing. If you run that, name is Alan and address is Toronto. Now, what we have done over here, this is important to know, that we have just simply created a person object, like, Alan. This is a person object. Person is a class, simply a class, and we have initialized its properties. Like we have initialized its property, and we have used one function which is basically looking like an interface, that I have used that function to set up an address which was not there, of course. Like we have another address. So constructor was initializing that one, and when I just created this one, these two values were automatically initialized. But then I got an interface over there, a function with which I can just access something, or we can just set up some properties, right? And now if you see that this is basically what that an interface is provided to you, another function that is there to set up some values, and we are not concerned with this the nitty-gritty details of how this function is working, but we are just doing that one. So this is one very simple example of this encapsulation, that we have been encapsulating this code and data, for example. So this is all data that we have, which is coming from the outside world, and this is basically the code or the functions that we are using. So there is one function that is being open to all the world. Now, encapsulation in general terms or in most of the programming languages, encapsulation is also called, if you know about that, this is also called hiding of data or data abstraction, right? That's also the name. What is that? It means that just only showing the essential features or important things to the user and hiding the complex detail from the background. So there is a complex detail from the background, and the old store example of that one is that when we say that you have a car and you have a very nice user interface or the area where you interact with your car, and we are never concerned with what's going on in the engine, what is the mechanism of the engine. We are just concerned with what is available to us. So most of the almost all real object-oriented programming languages, they provide access modifiers. Access modifiers are what? Public, private, that you are talking about. But there are no such type of access modifiers in JavaScript. That's an interesting thing. There are no public, private type of thing in JavaScript. No, right? So there are no public, private side of thing. So, but we use some different methods to implement these concepts, which are of course the real object-oriented programming languages concept, and we want to just if you want to implement them, we have to implement a certain way. Let's take one example of the same person class maybe, and we'll be just changing it a bit. So let's, for example, let's talk about this one, right? So I have now I'm creating this with my the old method. By the way, when I say old method, I'm talking about the traditional method of our JavaScript. So if I say that a person which has first name and last name, right? So I say, for example, that first name equal to, let me just create that. First name equal to f name, right? And let last name equal to l name, right? So I'm just creating a constructor object. I'm not creating a class over here, just to show you some interesting facts. So for example, I have get details function equal to function. What this function is doing, it's just returning, and it says, okay, let's take the backticks again. First name is $, and then we are saying that, for example, first name, last name is again $. Just make a practice of that one, because this is very interesting one, and we want to just be very fluent in that using the backticks. So this is one function, get details, right? So I have defined a function by using a normal traditional way of how we define a function expression. So I've just defined a function, and why I'm doing that, because I am right now inside my constructor function. I'm not in my class. If it was a class, I would have just defined this function in a very normal way as a method. As a method, I could have defined that. Now, there is one interesting fact over here. I am just doing another thing over here. If I come here, I'm defining another function, and I'm calling it this dot get details 2. I'm defining a function get details 2, right? And again, defining this the same way, the anonymous function or the function expression, right? Return, and I want to return almost exactly the same thing. So I'll just copy and paste this. Right. So this is a function that we have. So now I have defined two functions. There is one is a generic function, get details, that I've just defined over there. right? And then there is another this function, which is I'm calling with this dot get details. So I'm just defining this for that particular one. And this one is basically over here. Now let's see the behavior, what happens. So if I say let ln equal to new person, so I have to create this object like this one. So I'll say ln and Smith, maybe. So ln Smith, I've just created one. Now let's print something. Console.log, and I say ln dot first name. I'm first of all printing the first name of ln, and then console.log, I'm accessing ln dot get details, the first one, the first function, right? The get details one. I'm calling that one, and then console.log, and I'm saying that ln dot get details to the second function. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's run that one. Now you see what's going on. There is something. Let me make sure that I have not make any. Oh, vehicle.get details. Is there something from the behind coming? Oh, okay. I'm just looking at the wrong one. Okay, let's see what error it is giving. Yeah. So you see that it's giving over here that it says that ln.get details is not a function. It is not a function. It is not accepting. It is returning, basically, if you see that, it is returning an undefined over there. Is that right? And as well as it says that this ln.get details is not a function. And why it is not a function? Can anyone tell me? Can anyone tell me why it's calling it? It's not a function. It's just returning an undefined over there. Can anyone let me know why it's just showing that? I would be happy to have this answer. Why it says that get details is not a function? Because even though that get details is also defined exactly in the same way in the inside the object. But can anyone tell me why it is not defining that and why it is not accessing that one? Yes, anyone? I don't have my software in front of me. Let's see. Yes, is there anyone who can just let me know that why we are unable to access that? Because it is defined like this in class only. Okay, anyone else? Pavneet says that because this is defined like this in class only. We define that in the class like this one. Anyone else would like to just jump in, and I would like to have some some answers from someone. Yes, anyone? Why this first get details is not being accessed, or they're not accessing outside of this one, while as this second one is being accessed and second one is. So again, it means that if I show you something, if I just comment out this line and try to run my code again, you see that, okay, which first line? So ln dot first name. So you see that ln dot first name is typically just giving me an undefined. That you see. And the first name and when I'm just calling this get details to, it is saying that first name is Alan, the last name is Smith. It's basically giving both of them. So, but when I'm using this one and I'm just accessing this first name to start with, it really is not giving me the first name over there. It's not setting up, or it's just giving me that it is basically an undefined one. So can anyone let me know that why it is not accessing, or why it is not giving me that property, that I cannot access this undefined? It first of all, it's showing me undefined, and you see that it's giving me undefined. Why? Because it's giving for the first name, it is giving undefined, even though I have given this first name, and this object is very much created, and object is element created. Yeah. So probably listen here. I have created this object from this constructor. You know what I mean? This constructor function. Now, I have passed two values when I'm creating the object. Let me just show you the complete scheme. So I passed these two values. So they are supposed to come over here, and the first name will be settled as F name, and the second, like the last name, will be settled as the last name. Okay, so it was declared as let and not not this object. Which one you are talking about, Cleb? Which one you are talking about? Yes, Cleb. What do you say? So get details function. So you say that this get details function was not defined for this object. Yes, remember, this is not the property of this object, right? So then tell me why it is not giving when I'm just printing this first name over there. Then why it is giving this one as undefined? Can you just let me know, Cliff? Okay, I'll take your answer and I just consider your answer is correct. Then why it is not printing this first name over there? Because it says that this is right now when it first prints out, it says that it is undefined. You see here, it says that undefined. You see here, so it says that undefined. So why it's not giving that one? So you are right that the get details, it is not defined as for this object, like particular object where we are defining. But here it is not even giving that particular one for this first name. What is the reason behind that? Why it is not giving this as the first name? Okay, you are accessing directly the variable, not part of the object. Okay. What do you mean? Clef, can you just more explain that? That's wonderful. Can you more explain that? You are accessing directly the variable, not part of the object. So those who know about private and public access, they should know that. Exactly, the same thing. So you see what I was saying, that it has been just, it is one of the tricks that has been used, that the variable has been defined as let first name is equal to first name and last name is equal to last name. And they are, typically, Clef, do you understand? Typically, they have been declared as private. Do you understand that? Typically, they have been declared as private. Why? Because we cannot access them from outside of it. And I could have accessed them. How could I access them? I could have accessed them if I say this dot first name. Now, if I say this dot first name is equal to this, now run that one. Let's run this one. Okay, it says okay. Why it's giving an error? For example, over here, first name is not defined. Okay, so now yes. So listen about that one, because here it is this dot first name, and now get details is also not getting that one, and now it will get this by this dot first name. Now let's run that one, and now I'll show you. Now you see here, you understanding, clear? Your answer is 100% accurate. Now this is accessing this ln, and why it is accessing? Because this has been defined for the object. Now please remember, and why this was giving an error over here, because first name was nothing. Now this was this first name, the property object. So this keyword is very important, and this keyword makes some variable as as the property of that particular object that we are talking about. Makes sense to everyone? Pavneet, you were asking that question. Are you understanding that one? So now when I've defined this dot first name, it is basically accessible, and now it is giving that value. So this is the way to define something. Sorry. So this is the way to define something as private, if you talk about that. So now I have just defined something as private of that one, and now this will be accessed as the first name. And that's why this function is also not accessed. Why? Because this function is a normal function, and I cannot. So typically I'm defining this one as also private. So this is a public which I can access. This is a private that I cannot access. Wonderful, Clef. You have given a very nice answer, right? So this is basically abstraction or hiding. So we are hiding these two names from that one, like these two variables from that one, and we can only get this from this function, which is accessing those values and cannot be It is not changing them, it is just accessing them, those two values. Right. So the last thing that we want to discuss is with respect to this this object oriented is inheritance. And you know, this is another important pillar of object oriented, inheritance. So inheritance is what, as in our real life, we say that most of the object oriented programming languages specifically follow that. Now we say that in JavaScript also we do inheritance in some ways or others by using that extend keyword that we usually use with that with your in normal traditional JavaScript programming object oriented programming language. Let's see the example over here. And now I'm creating a class again just to make it that one. Constructor it will accept a single value, a name, and it will set this dot name equal to name, right? Now this is a normal constructor that we have created, and usually we create a function toString, and let's say that it will return the backticks. Name of person is now $sign and this dot name, right? So this is basically this toString will always return that one. Now this is one class person. Now if I want to extend that, again a very old style example, so student or a teacher, something like that. So a student class student extends. So extends is a keyword which is used in most of the programming languages, but not in C++. C++ uses different syntax of that one. Can anyone tell me how to create child? Have you studied inheritance in C++ till now? Clem or anyone? Have you studied inheritance? And you know how to create the child class of a parent class? Okay, you have not discussed that. Anyhow, you will see that there is some different method. But here what we are saying that this student class will become the child class of this person class. Right? This will become a child class of this person class. Now, this will have a constructor as we have that one. This will have a constructor, and this constructor will accept name and ID. And now see here, this is very interesting. Here it will call its parent's constructor first of all, and by passing the name. You remember, because its parent has this constructor which accepts a name. So when we use super keyword, and you will be using this super keyword a lot, you know, by the way. So sorry, it makes it all comment. So super keyword for calling parent constructor. So the person class will be called as the parent class. So if I write super name, I'm calling the constructor of super. Like super means the person class. Does that make sense? So I'm calling this constructor technically by using this super keyword. So student's constructor will accept two values. One of the value it will pass to its parent and say, okay, just set up the name over there because I am here and I will set up the ID for this one. This dot ID is equal to ID. The ID which has been passed, I'll set up that ID with myself. Now, the other function toString, it does not need that one because toString can access variables. And how can it access? So it will say return and again backticks. Now see here, it will say, I'll say $sign, curly braces, and here this is super.toString. Now first of all, call the super.toString method, right? And then student ID equal to $this dot ID. So you know what happens? That it will go to its parent and call the super.toString. So this toString will be called and this name will be set up over there. And that already has been set up by this super keyword. And now it will just come back and it will just return that typical value. Now, if I just create a student, for example, so I say let Mike equal to new student. So I'm creating. So let's create Michael or something, the name, and let's give an ID of 11, something like that. Right? And console.log. And now it will do that we can just say that Mike dot toString. Right, so back to toString. Now if I see this, okay, what is the error? What error it is giving? First thing, okay, I just left, I think I left something. No. Oh, this is running. So name of person is Michael and the student ID is 11. So you see that now this super keyword always goes to its parent and call that. So super without any name will go to the parent and call its constructor with the name, passing that name. And in the same way here, super.toString will do what? It will go to the method or the top method and it will just access that method. And then this super2string will be called over here, and then this student ID will be printed with that one, and it is printed over there. Make sense to everyone? Any ambiguity about that? You can just ask right now, or maybe just later on also. You can just later on you can ask about that one. So as I said, I will be making a project, a very nice project. We'll be making that project once we are done with HTML and DOM as well. By the way, when we'll be done with the DOM, I'll be making a project and I'll give you some some real example, real life example of all these codes and everything. Right. So if you don't have any questions, we are stopping over here. And by the way, you can inform your the other colleagues, because I've been noticing there is very short attendance. Very few people are attending classes. So this class attendance, as I have said before already, that this class's attendance is always marked, and they are all being marked absent. And of course, since I'm taking only one class, so they will be technically marked absent in both of the sections. So just remind them, if you have any friends who are in this section, that please join this class on their time, because this is the only live class that we have, like with your section. So they should always be coming over here. We have only very few people over here. So, and those who are here till the end, they will be marked as present. Otherwise, who have left, of course, they won't be marked as present. So thank you very much, everyone. If you don't have any question, you can just put up a chat message. So that's nice that it's recording. So towards the end, I'm just recording that. Please join your class. Clef, which test you are talking about? Are you talking about test 1 or test 2? Okay, Clef, just give me some time, because I will be on over the weekend. I will check your test 1. I've not seen that, I've not technically checked your test 1. I will check the test 1, and Clef, then I'll discuss it with you. I know that there were some problems, and I'll discuss about that. Don't worry about that. I know that there were some data type and all those problems, and I know about that, and I'll discuss. Don't worry, I'll just not finalize the marks unless I'll have a meeting with you. But not today, Clef, but I'll do that in the next week, right? Next week I'll be doing those meetings. Right, Clef? So it's for everyone, because it's just not. Yeah, why not, Clef? You can, why not?
We are getting another test